Okay, so you're all very welcome to week 2 of the Art of Reflection course. You're particularly welcome if you missed last week. I know some people missed last week and caught up on the video, and a few people, I think 3 or 4 people, sent apologies for tonight that they couldn't make it tonight, and they'll join us again next week. But you're all very welcome. To give you a sense of, so my name is Vajrashura. I might just slightly yet again rename myself, just so you can see my name. Sorry about the clicking. Okay, and just to give a sense of what we'll be doing tonight. So we'll be so one of the things we'll be doing is we'll have a recap of last week, and we'll look at the home practice. Before we do all that, I haven't put it up there. Before we do all that, we will be doing a short body scan to arrive. We'll go into groups then to discuss how you got on during the week with your practice. We'll be looking this week, the overarching theme, which I haven't actually put up there, is about reflecting on our experience as it happens to us. So if something happens, we reflect upon it. So an important entry point into that is self-awareness, knowing ourselves. And we'll do a little reflection on that as well, or maybe even 2 reflections up to the break. And then after the break, we'll look at a few more aspects, like having no fixed self is a great thing to reflect upon, particularly when you're in positive states of mind. And then you might not always be in positive states of mind or pleasurable states of mind. So we'll talk about reflecting when you're having a painful experience. And a painful experience could include, a sense of suffering, a sense of loss, a sense of foolishness, even, your own. It's quite good to reflect upon one's own foolishness, it must be said. And but not in a way that makes you, unkind to yourself or anything. And then we'll look at home practice, and we'll have some chance for questions, and there'll be a group as well to set our intentions for the week. Yeah, so that's what we'll do this week. Then before we get on to what we'll be doing, what we looked at last week, I think it's good just to spend a few minutes arriving. So why don't we do a very brief but hopefully effective body scan. So why don't we just set ourselves up so we're sitting upright, comfortable, at ease. You don't have to go to huge efforts to to get into your full lotus position or anything like that, which I can't even do anyway. But we'll just set ourselves up in a position of ease. And you might want to silence your phone as well, which I've already done, thankfully, just so you don't get interrupted, given you're online already. Okay, so settling into your posture, settling into sitting here. Maybe just taking 3 deep breaths down into your belly, feeling the whole of your rib cage expand as you breathe in and breathing out. And as you breathe in the 3rd time, keeping that openness across the chest as you breathe out. So we're reasonably upright then. Noticing then where your attention naturally moves to, or naturally is. Is it up in your head and the argument you had earlier, or the work you have to do? Is it with the sounds around you? Is it in your belly with your food that you've just eaten? Is it with feelings of pain or pleasure in the body? Or is it just often in merry distraction? Maybe bring yourselves more into our body at this stage. Just can be good to ground ourselves in the physical experience of sitting here, feeling your sitting bones, your feet, your legs, often easiest to feel the contact of these parts of the body with the floor, the chair, the cushions. Feeling becoming aware of the hands and the arms. As best we can. If we don't feel much, just doing what we can. And then how does our face feel? Are we frowning or at ease? Our eyelids, our nose, our mouth, our cheeks. Becoming aware of the throat and the neck. If you can, as best you can. Then moving down into the chest, into the stomach, into the abdomen. Feeling the air, the refreshment coming in with every breath, with every in-breath. And then relaxing with every out-breath, a little bit more if we can, letting go into sitting here. Letting go into the support of the chair, cushions, the ground. And if we feel tired or heavy, just letting the chair, the cushions carry that heaviness, allowing ourselves to feel tired. If that's what we need to do. And otherwise, we can just stay with the breath for a few more moments. And then when we're ready, broadening out once more, having a sense of the room around us, the people, the sounds we can hear. Being aware of ourselves here on this course with each other on Zoom, orientating towards an engagement with that for the next wee while. And when you're ready, you can bring the practice to a close and begin to open your eyes again and introduce movement. Great. Okay, so I hope you're not too tired, and I hope you're feeling well. So let's just let me just share with you then what we looked at last week, and then we'll go into the groups in a few moments. Yeah. So this was last week. Sorry, this is tonight rather. So let me show you last week. So last week was week 1 of the course, and hopefully you're either here or you got to see the video, but no matter if you didn't. So we had some introduction to reflection, an introduction to, what it is. In a way, it's turning over something in your minds. And really why we do this is highlighted by the 3 levels of wisdom. So the first level is the level that we hear things, we read things, and we take things in. And then the second level is where and the first level is where we clarify what we've heard. Second level is the level of reflection, you might say, where we turn it over in our minds. We chew it, we chew on it, we put it in our own words. We bring it from an idea into an emotion and down into how we behave. And then the third level is where we just embody and are with the wisdom. Yeah. And the example I gave was that hatred is never ceased by hatred. Hatreds are only pacified by love. This is the eternal law. So we looked at that last week. That was an old Buddhist teaching. And we started getting started on reflection. And I made a few points there and a few other points as well. So we saw how we could learn to do nothing. That was one of the pointers. You might not feel much initially, but it will build up over time. It will have an effect. Reflection is not worrying. So you're not worrying about things. And time spent reflecting is never wasted. So they were a few of the points that we made last week. And then we talked about the home practice as well, homework to do. We also did a reflection in there of doing nothing for 10 minutes. And so that was part of the homework. So the home practice was to read the introductory chapter. I also said you could read chapter 1 if you have the time, but it's more important that you did some reflection actually. So one of the big things I wanted you to do was to do 10 minutes a day of nothing. Yeah. And we did it last week and there was a hugely positive response to it. So hopefully you managed to carry that positive response into your week as well. Yeah. And do it every day. I think I managed 6 days out of 7. I must confess there was one day I didn't do it, but I did hugely enjoy it myself. And also just to be aware of your thoughts and notice if they're skillful, if they're helpful or unhelpful. That was the other thing I was commenting, because there's no point in sitting there thinking horrible thoughts about yourself for 10 minutes. That's not reflection. That's just masochism or whatever you want to call it. Yeah, and I was saying, so be aware of the quality of your thoughts as well. And I did make the point that it's better to reflect than read if you have to choose between the two. And I was encouraging you to join Slack and let us know how you're doing. And a few people have joined Slack, a couple of dozen people. So it'd be great to have some more people on there. And there was some really interesting reflections being shared there and nice pictures as well. So do join Slack this week if you can and let us know how you're doing. Yep. Okay, so that's the home practice. So what we'll do now, maybe I can just get that. I should have this ready. Okay, I'll just share that in the chat. And what we're going to do now is we're going to go into groups, and the groups are the same groups every week. Sorry now for the typing. The groups are the same groups every week, so you will be in the same group as last week. So if you can remember your group, please go and join it. If you weren't here last week, that's fine. Stephen will put you in groups depending upon the numbers in each group. Stephen, if that's okay. And if you have any problems joining the group, I find that Zoom can be a little glitchy when people are trying to go to the wrong group. So if you just can't join, no matter what you do, maybe the best thing to do is just unmute yourself and ask Stephen, or just put your name in the chat. And if you know what group you're meant to be in, Stephen will move you in as well. Okay, so we'll do that. We'll check in for, maybe we'll go for 14 minutes, Stephen, if that's okay. And if you want to hit the button there, Stephen, so it'll come up and people can then, it should come up. If you're on a phone, I think it'll still come up the same way. So that's great. I really enjoyed that group. I hope you guys did as well. And, there's some lovely things said that, a couple of things that really struck me. There was a lot that struck me there, but one person was saying how, when you simplify things and you're just sitting, everything becomes more beautiful. So I don't know if that was your experience as well over the week. And another thing one person said was that they can't believe how busy you are until you do nothing. And a person reminded me of a story that I'd heard. This was told to me by the guy who taught me to meditate. And he was saying about the importance of just getting your meditation going every single day. And we're trying to set up a 20-minute meditation practice each day. And he told the story of a guy in America teaching meditation in prisons to death row inmates. And these would be guys in their cells for like, I don't know the exact details, but, you know, so let's say 23 and a half hours a day in their cell, you know, looking at the walls. And some of them really took to meditation and some of them didn't. And the story goes that the meditation teacher, one guy said to him, yeah, I don't really think this meditation's for me. And the guy asked him why. And he said, I just don't have the time. So, you know, 10 minutes a day to do nothing. So if you can't do 10 minutes a day, I might offend you now, but I have to say, you're going to have to look at your life. You're going to have to take a long look at yourself if you can't do 10 minutes a day of doing nothing. So make sure you do it if you're not doing it. I did it 6 days out of 7, which I was reasonably happy with. I wish I had done it the other day just so I could come back and, you know, have a higher pedestal to chide you all from. But yeah, no, it was really, really enjoyable. I mostly did it just there looking at the window, very enjoyable. 1 or 2 days where I had resistance. And we can, yeah. Okay, so if you have any questions or comments, by the way, you can always post them in the chat. Let me just, great. So the theme for tonight then is reflecting on our experience as it happens to us, you could say. And it's based upon chapter 2 of the book. So you know, if some of you have read the book further ahead, so you might have heard some of this already, but or you'll be reading it this week. So Plato famously said, to kind of paraphrase him very slightly, let me just, I'm not sure if it's an exact quote because I don't think Plato spoke English. But anyways, so he said that philosophy starts with a sense of wonder. Yeah, a sense of wonder. And I think reflection starts with a sense of wonder, a sense of inquiry. And maybe, you know, normally you don't have a sense of wonder in your life because we're so busy. But certainly, I think once you do nothing for a period of time, and once you meditate, and once you start doing courses like this, you know, maybe your sense of wonder gets fired off a bit again. Yeah, your wonder and at the beauty of the world and so on. And one of the most wonderful things, I think, or one of the things that can be most worthy of wonder, is that we exist. You know, that there is a me here experiencing this. Well, some kind of me anyway. Buddhism would have various views on that. Some kind of me looking out at the world or experiencing the world. And I remember, particularly as a young man in my teenage years in particular, like, you know, these really big questions like, why am I here? What is the world about? You know, what the hell am I doing? What am I up to? What is this? What am I? You know? And often as we get older, then these questions tend to fade, sadly. And but I think what I'd like us to do this week is to kind of connect back in with that sense of wonder, particularly at the sense of wonder that is us, you could say. I don't mean in an extremely self-important way or navel gazing or that kind of thing, but just a sense of wonder, a sense of self-awareness. And self-awareness is like awareness is what self-awareness is what distinguishes us from everything else in the world, as far as we can tell, you know. And the thing about self-awareness is that it allows us to step back from our behavior and what we're experiencing and to reflect upon it. So it allows us to step back from things and reflect upon them. Yeah. And that's really special. That's a really special thing that we can do. You know, as far as we can tell, most animals aren't able to do that very much. They're entirely in their experience of what's happening, you know, you could say. It's probably a little more complex than that, but certainly no other animal has it like us, as far as we know. And we can have all these kinds of thoughts and reflections upon why, you know, how we are and what we do. And, you know, with self-awareness comes problems as well. So we can ask ourselves questions like, we can be aware, for example, of our own unkindness. We can ask ourselves, why did I throw a tantrum there? Why did I take that so personally? Why did I get so upset when my partner, husband, wife, kid, parent said that to me? So it can make us more aware as well in some ways of painful experience, and it can help us to reflect on that, however. So big questions like, what's life about? Why do I waste so much time? Why do I feel lonely? Why don't I feel complete? Those kinds of questions, they're questions that are very human and painful, and at the same time, very good reflections for very good reflections to turn over as well. And if we're self-aware at all, these questions will arise. The more aware you are, the more these kinds of questions will arise for you. And in a way, all we have to do with this week's reflection practice is simply give time to these questions. So if you're doing nothing, if you're leading a life where you're promoting self-awareness, questions will naturally occur to you, and reflection is just giving time to those questions. So this is why it's so important from last week to give yourself the space, give yourself the time, 10 minutes of doing nothing. It's so that when these questions arise, that we can give them the space to really flower. Yeah. So the questions are already there in us. We already ask ourselves these questions. When I say that these questions have faded from our childhood, they probably haven't faded. It's probably just that we don't give them any time anymore. These questions probably still arise all the time. Maybe cognitively, maybe more emotionally, a feeling of there must be more to this. What would that be? So reflection is simply giving time to those questions. Yeah. We don't have to be a philosopher to reflect. All we have to do is give time to those questions. Yeah. But most of the time we don't, because we're not interested enough. We don't give it enough time. They're a bit unpleasant, maybe. Maybe we don't feel we have the time to worry about those things right now. It might feel like they're a bit hard work. They might throw up things we don't like. Or maybe we think that they're just beyond us, and they're often the reasons why we wouldn't necessarily give those questions time, but it is worth giving those questions the time. Okay, so let's see. I might skip ahead a little bit. Yeah, in the book, Ratnaguna goes into how reflection is always personal. So I just want to emphasize that as well, that reflection is always personal to you. It's always something to do with you and your experience and what's happening to you. And he gives the example from a philosopher called Marcel, who says that, maybe I'll just share the screen as well. I'll share it briefly, but I'm not going to spend too much time on it because I want to do some reflection. When it's always in response to a problem, typically. So something arises, something happens, which is a disruption or a shock to our usual routine. And then you reflect upon it, or you reflect upon something of value pertaining to that. Yeah. So a very simple example of reflection is you lose your watch. So you go to look at your time and your watch isn't there. It is there now in my hand, but it isn't there. So you then think and reflect upon, well, that my watch is important to me. And at some level, you know that. So you reflect then upon, well, where might I have left it? What was I doing? And so on. So that, and then you remember that the last time you had it, you took it off to wash your hands. So you left it in the bathroom, So that's a very simple example of reflection. But say another example of reflection might be to do with your inner life. You know what I mean? So you have this view of yourself that you get on really well with everyone. Yeah. And then someone falls out with you and doesn't like you, and it's very clear they don't like you. So that's a shock to your normal routine of things. So then, because you are very important to yourself, you reflect upon that. So why did I take that so personally? What is it in me that wants everyone to like me? Is there something I've done here with this person that I could, understand a bit better, that they, is there something in what they say to me? So there's that disruption in that they fall out with you. And then because your relationships and you is of value to you, you reflect upon it more. You don't really reflect upon abstractions, the Buddha was famously, there's a character in the early Buddhist texts his name was Vajrashura, and he used to arrive every now and again with these questions for the Buddha, like, Is the universe infinite or finite? What happens to a Buddha after he dies? And the Buddha would just remain silent, because he said afterwards, once Vajrashura wandered off frustrated, he said, there's no answer I could give that would be useful for him, you know? And part of that is that it's just very abstract. So keep reflection really personal and relevant to your situation, you know? So something in your experience gets disrupted, and that is a really good opportunity for reflection when you have a disruption in your life. Yeah. And that disruption, it wouldn't be a disruption if it wasn't painful. So, or a bit, you know, often disruptions are good, I guess, but usually they're not. So, in my experience anyway. So, yeah, just give, even if it's painful, give it time. Yeah. Sorry, I just want to shut down something that's sending messages to me. Okay. So I think what we'll do now is, why don't we just do a reflection for 5 minutes? Okay. So I'd encourage you just to sit at ease, and we'll do this. I personally reflect better with my eyes open. I find if I close my eyes, I kind of get into meditation. But it's up to you. If you're better with your eyes closed. But just don't be, maybe like turn away from the screen and look at your wall, or look at the window or something like that. A bit like where you just do nothing. You can do it with your eyes closed if you want. It's up to you. So just settling into a comfortable seating arrangement. I'm just taking a couple of minutes to just do nothing, really. Maybe now just thinking back to a time, or some time in the last week or so, or even longer if you wish, where there was some disruption to your routine, some disruption to your life. Something erupted into your life, or something disrupted your life. Or you're a bit thrown by something. That's another way of thinking about it. Maybe it was something springing from your own ethical, you know, a kind of a lapse of your ethical practice, you know, where you snapped at someone or did something you wouldn't be proud of, or maybe something else just happened to you from the outside. Were you able to stay with that intensity or discomfort at the time if it was uncomfortable? Or if it was pleasurable, were you able to, did you get lost in that intoxication of it? And is there something pertinent to you that's interesting there to reflect upon? Any kind of emotional edge there you could feel your way into? Remembering that reflection is as much emotional as cognitive. We'll just spend a few minutes on this now. And if you're not clear of what you're reflecting on, just give a bit of space for questions to emerge and give those questions time. You might find it useful every now and again just to take a break and go back to doing nothing, giving space again for something else to emerge around that topic. Be careful of not furiously thinking that which isn't really reflection. Okay, and now letting go of that reflection. And you might want to now close your eyes and just sit and see how you feel after having done that. Opening to your heart, opening to your guts, opening to your mind. Do you feel different now to an hour ago? Or even 10 minutes ago? And then when you're ready, bringing the practice to a close, and you can open your eyes again. Okay. So we'll go for a break in a few minutes, but it'd be not, if you wanted to write in the chat how that was, if you want to take a minute or two of the break to do it, that would be great. But just to say that, doing this kind of work where you're opening to, maybe your own behavior, like opening to things that disrupt your life or how you've behaved, it requires you being truthful with yourself, I guess. And, this model of the disruption and then acting upon it in a way that's pertinent to you, it requires a degree of self-awareness. And what we're trying to do in Buddhism is move away from ignorance. Ignorance, you could say, is where you're not really, I'll read out a definition of it. A stubborn closed-mindedness about learning anything that you feel might threaten your ego identity and upset the sense of security you wish to get from your ego identity. Yeah. So that's what we call kind of delusion or ignorance in Buddhism. It's where you don't really want to know because it might threaten your sense of well-being or your sense of security that you felt up. Yeah. So when we start to turn towards our experience in this way, with self-awareness and with self-knowing, I think the main obstacle tends to be emotional, an emotional resistance to going there. I don't know if anyone found that there in that reflection. So we need to, we might need to demolish some well-cherished stories we have about ourselves. I'm always a nice person. And then you are not very nice to someone, and that's the disruption. And then you have to reflect upon, well, I thought I was a really nice person, but I wasn't really nice to this person. And that's the reflection you have to engage with. So you have to be prepared to do that. It isn't an easy path, So we need positive emotion. We need, in Buddhism, we call it metta, loving kindness. And those of you who have done the meditation course will know the metta bhavana, the meditation practice, which is designed to help you cultivate this loving kindness for yourself and other people. And just as I said last week, that reflection is not worrying. Reflection is also not beating yourself up or giving yourself a hard time. Yeah, that's not reflection. Yeah. Or reflecting on how you're an awful person. That's not reflection either. Yeah. Reflection should make you more free and happy, not miserable. Yeah. And if Buddhist practice makes you miserable over any kind of medium term length of time, you're probably doing it wrong. Yeah, you're probably doing it wrong. Yeah. It will be challenging at times. And it will force us to look at our self-preoccupation and be a bit less self-preoccupied. Yeah. But I think we need to come to depend less upon qualities like, what other people think of us and our sense of status and how good we are, things like that. And I think we need to depend more upon metta, loving kindness, connectedness, genuine desire for the truth. Those are the kinds of things we need to depend upon. And having a confidence that if we do this with metta, it will go well. That's what we need to depend upon, yeah. Rather than status, power, beauty, skill, popularity, all those kinds of things, which are very impermanent anyway. Yeah. Okay, I think that's all I want to say before the tea break. When we come back, we're going to do a bit more specific stuff. So we're going to start with a reflection on self, and we're going to look at positive emotions, negative emotions, foolishness, suffering, loss, and things like that. And we're going to look at how we can reflect upon these things when they happen to us. So there is a couple of questions come in there, and I'll get them after the break. But why don't we be back maybe at 8 minutes past 8, ready to go? That's just about 10 minutes, and we'll see you then. And you can type your questions in the chat if you want to in the meantime, or how you got on. Great. Okay. So just to let you know about a couple of upcoming events that we're running while we're still waiting for people to come back. This coming Saturday, we're having a very special event in the Buddhist Centre. So, online on the Buddhist Centre. So as you probably heard, COVID has hit very strongly in India. And about a third of our order is in India, and there's huge numbers of our community in India. And at least a dozen order members, at least, I think, have died from COVID in India. So we're organizing a special morning this Saturday from 10:30 on Zoom, where we're going to hear from some of our Buddhist community in India. And I mean, this might be more relevant if you've been around our community and know our community a bit more, but everyone is welcome. You'll get to hear some talks from some of the people living in India and the conditions they're under. We're also going to try and fundraise a bit for them, but I think that's the main thing, is just to hear from them and connect with them as one community here in the West to their community in India. So the details for that are on the website, dublinbuddhistcentre.org. I'll include them in the email. And that's this Saturday. And then the other thing to mention is that if you know how to meditate with us, if you know the mindfulness of breathing and the metta bhavana, we'll be running a summer retreat. So it's a 6-day long retreat online from the 2nd to the 8th of July. So next month, and it'll be an online retreat. If you've not done an online retreat, it can be surprising just how effective they are. They're not like going away as such, where we go countryside and are just on our own, but they're still pretty good and doing lots of reflection and lots of meditation. And the theme is the loving kindness meditation practice, the Brahma Viharas, the Metta Bhavana, and what are called the Brahma Viharas, which are the flavors of metta. So really a deep exploration of metta, loving kindness. And then the other final thing to say, and maybe Stephen, you could put the link in the chat when you're ready, is that this course, of course, is free. And you're completely free to just do the course for free. We're delighted to be able to offer everything for free. And if you're in a position where you can give a donation to the Buddhist Centre to help support us continuing to offer these, I think, important teachings to people, please do so. That would be really appreciated. And you can give as much or as little as you want. And we're suggesting, I think, 100 euros for the course if you want to, if you're in a position to give that. But if you can't, that's completely fine. And if you want to give even more, that's great as well. Okay, and then just to respond to the chat, so there's quite a few really good comments here, I have to say. So Sam was saying how the reflection helped him, just to summarize, put a bit of space around something that was quite disruptive a few hours ago and felt it feels less irksome now. Caroline had an insight about a difficult person and realizing that there's only so much you can do for them and that everyone is deserving of compassion. That's a very good insight. Dan has a question, which I'll come back to in a moment, because it's more of a question. I'll just go through the comments. Maggie has been finding that she's been judgmental and needs to accept that and be honest. So yeah, well done, Maggie, for admitting that, because it's not easy to admit that in a forum of 50 people. But I think we really do need to be honest. That like nobody's, as far as I know, nobody here is enlightened. Nobody here is perfect. So we just have to accept that we have shortcomings. I get irritated with people. I just have to admit that to myself. Yeah. Kira said the reflection took me in a different direction than I thought the situation was headed. Kira, I hope you mean a good direction, but let's see. And then Miriam shared a sad instance that she had about finding 2 dead cats. And I think you responded there with beauty, actually, with roses, but working with the emotion of that. Lindsay was saying that the reflection brought her an insight relating to a pattern in a relationship. And where's that gone now? Sorry. It was both surprising and useful. So when we give time to the questions that are there for us, interesting things happen, interesting things happen. So Stephen, Rohanna's just asked a question here. Could you respond to that? Because that's more of a technical nature.
Yeah, I just wrote back there. Actually, yeah, thanks. That's really useful to know. We'll definitely have to have a look into that.
Okay, yeah, we will actually. That's true. Okay, thanks, Rohanna. And then Steph says every day. Yes, so Steph's seeing the futility of thinking negative thoughts about a certain person. So it's interesting, just a short 5 or 8 minute reflection has had all these effects on people. So reflection is really important to give the time for these questions that emerge. Yeah. And then Dan asks, how useful is it to think of reflection as opposed to meditation? The more I chew on it, the more I think they're on a spectrum, or 2 sides of the coin. They are on a spectrum. There's a lot more that could be said, Dan, but I'm running out of time. But I think there are times when, like I said last week, there are times when we'll think and there's times when we don't think, we just can be. And I think in meditation, there are times when you will do more cultivative practices like cultivating awareness, cultivating metta. And there are times in meditation where you might want to reflect a bit more on change or something that's happened to you. But I personally, I find a lot of reflection better off the cushion, where you're sitting just more naturally. Yeah. Okay, there's so much more that could be said there and responded to, but we're going to run out of time. So I want to do another short reflection, short but not without its potency, hopefully. So why don't we just sit again comfortably and close our, well, no, not close our eyes. We can just do it in whatever way we want, whatever is most useful for you. You might want to close your eyes and just breathe and be with the body breathing for the first moment or two, if that's helpful. I usually recommend people put their hand on their belly as well, just to, bring yourself into an awareness of your guts and your belly when you reflect. We'll start the reflection then, and you can do this with your eyes open or closed. But I want you to ask yourself, what kind of person, how would you tend to describe the kind of person you are? Or maybe how would someone who's a really good friend of yours describe you in terms of, pithy little statements like, outgoing, capable, shy, intelligent, honest, quick-tempered, impatient, friendly, any of those kinds of phrases. How would you describe yourself? How do you see yourself? So do these phrases or descriptions that you've come up for yourself with, do they describe the whole of you? Do these descriptions reach every part of you? Or is there more of you? Do you feel you're perfectly encapsulated by these phrases? Do they do justice to the subtlety of your being? Can any words describe the whole of you? Describe and reach the full breadth of what you experience as you? Okay, and when you're ready then, bringing that practice to a close. Okay, I hope nobody got freaked out there by that. Often when you reflect upon yourself and the intransiency of yourself, you have to be, you can kind of go interesting places. So if anyone wants to let me know in the chat how that was, that would be great. But I just because of time, I'm going to keep going a little bit, and we can chat about it in our groups in a bit. But the Buddha said famously that there is no self, and what he really meant was, for practical purposes, there's nothing fixed. There's nothing pinned down about ourselves that we can encapsulate fully in words. I don't know if that's what you found in that reflection, but for me, no words can really capture the full mystery of experience, either of myself or of any of you or anyone I've met, so I don't know if the reflection, I'm hesitant in saying how your reflection should have gone, but that's certainly what I experience when I do those kinds of reflections. And the Buddha talked about how all of our suffering pretty much comes from having this idea that we're much more fixed than we are. Yeah, that we're much more of a certain type of way. I'm just this type of person. Thanks, Caroline. That's great. And it's like this whole. I have a friend who says they're not a morning person. They're not a morning person. And and I can see what they mean. And sometimes it's almost like they condemn their mornings then to be miserable times, So we kind of create a world by having this view of ourselves as being in a certain kind of way. And we much reduce the chance of us having actually a really lovely morning, if you see what I mean. So the Buddha says that we do this at deeper and deeper and deeper levels. And that's where our suffering comes from, because we're not much more open to the flow of things, that is much more unpinned downable and much more mysterious and much more changeable. Yeah. So that's what the Buddha means, that there's no fixed self. Any labels we have are merely linguistic conventions. So, if it's a lot easier to say you're standing on my toes than there is an experience of feet standing on the experience of toes. So it's useful to have me and you and I do this and things like that, but it's all just a convention for something that's much more mysterious than that. So one of the things I'm going to be suggest. So there's lots of different ways to reflect on our experience, but what I'm going to suggest this week is that when you're in a positive state of mind, you're happy, you're spacious, you're feeling well, this is the kind of thing you can reflect upon. Yeah, this is the kind of thing you can reflect upon. It's a nice thing to reflect upon when you're in positive states of mind. Yeah. Another interesting one you can reflect upon is, where do you end and the world begin, and things like that. So I'm going to single out Kira here. So Kira's eating a biscuit at the moment or something. Sorry, Kira. So an interesting reflection might be, where is that biscuit no longer a biscuit, and where is, and when does it not become me at the other end of things? So this is a traditional Buddhist reflection. You reflect upon, well, when is the air I breathe in air in the world, and when is it me? When is the food I eat, when is it not me, and when is it me, what I consider to be me? And all these reflections break down this hard and fast distinction between me being here and the world out there, and we tend to experience things much more in a flow. Yeah, and we're much happier. Anyways, there's more about this that you can read about in the book. There's quite a lot of detail in the book this week. So that's the first kind of way that we can reflect upon our experience. Yeah, what we can reflect upon. So so that's that. So we can reflect upon having no self when we're in positive states of mind. Yeah. The next thing I'll talk about is it being in negative states of mind, what we can reflect upon. We can reflect upon those states of mind. Let me just outline what I'm going to talk about for the rest of the thing first. We can also reflect upon our foolishness and its consequences. So I'll say a little bit about that in a few minutes, but in a positive way, in the sense of seeing what we can learn. And then we can also reflect upon suffering and loss. So we'll see if we have time to talk a bit about that as well tonight. So these are different ways that we can reflect this week on our experience. When we're feeling positive, we can do things like reflecting on no self. When experience is a bit more painful, that's what I mean by negative states of mind, we can reflect upon that in a certain kind of way, a different kind of way. Our foolishness and its consequences, that's so that we can learn. And then suffering and loss, because that will leave its mark upon us anyway. Yeah. Okay, so to say a little bit more then about negative states of mind, is that it's actually, I think, a lot easier to reflect upon negative states of mind than when we're in positive states of mind. When we're in positive states of mind, we tend to just feel happy and we don't feel a need to reflect. We think, oh, everything's good anyway. And I remember one Buddhist teacher saying to me, positive states of mind are like Teflon. They kind of slide past, whereas painful states of mind are like sandpaper. You notice every little millimeter of them, So we'll tend to have more impetus to reflect when we're in negative states of mind. And, when we're in negative states of mind, our experience is painful, maybe cramped, maybe frustrated, and we want to escape those. So, a good thing to do is to reflect upon, well, why are you so upset here? Why are you getting so worked up here? Why are you so angry here? I get very impatient with bad drivers when I'm driving my car. And it's a really good reflection for me in those times and afterwards to say, well, why can't I just let that person go in front of me? Why do I feel like I need to win here? That's a really interesting way for me to reflect upon my negative states of mind, why do I need to be the one to have the last word in this conversation? What difference is it going to make in the bigger scheme of things? That would be another example that you could reflect upon. Why do I get so worked up about this thing? Why do I get so worked up about this thing? That's another question you could reflect upon when you're in a state of mind. Why do I take this so personally? I think that's a really interesting question as well to reflect upon. Why do I take this so personally? Another question might be, why am I so attached to this story or this outcome? Questions like that. So when you're in a negative state of mind, usually what we do is we just direct them towards hatred of others, or we get into massive craving and we go and get drunk or something, or binge watch Netflix, or we get into blame, or we direct them towards ourselves and get into a story about how we're such a bad person. But what we're trying to do here is we're trying to use these reflections not to make us feel worse about ourselves, but to get ourselves out of those negative states of mind, to let go of them. Like Sam said earlier in his thing, that by reflecting upon that difficult person, he found he had more space around it, to paraphrase him slightly. Can't remember his exact words. It was less irksome. Wasn't that what you said, Sam? So it's something like that. So the negative states of mind are less irksome. They bother us less. So, why does it really matter anyway, winning in this situation? Questions like that. That feel okay for people as a reflection? Yeah, no, that's good. So, and we'll do a reflection in a few minutes again, if you're up for it, where you can bring yourself back to a negative state of mind, or what we're going to talk about now, which is the next one, which is foolishness. So one of the main, we're foolish beings. The Buddha once famously said that all worldly people are mad. Yeah. And what he meant is that if you're not enlightened, you're somewhat mad, basically. And he meant that loosely rather than technically, in the sense that we do all these things that we think will bring us happiness, but won't, we think that by winning an argument, we'll be happy, or that if we just had a bigger car or a better job, we'd be happy. And then when we get that bigger car or better job, we want the next bigger car or next bigger job, So we do all these foolish things. And there's a few responses to foolishness. Often when we're foolish, we try and divert any kind of blame by blaming other people. Yeah, we divert the blame to other people as quickly as we can. Or we might get into just being really hard on ourselves. Yeah, being really hard on ourselves and feeling down on ourselves. And there's never a reason to be hard on yourself. But I think what we need to do is train ourselves to see humiliation and a realization of foolishness as a brilliant opportunity for learning. Yeah. So I'll give you two stories. Okay, one is of a friend and one is my own. And there's a man called Padma Vajra, who some of you will know. He's a very senior order member living in a retreat center in the UK. And he's been ordained since he was like 18 years old, I think. And I think he's been ordained longer than I've been alive, actually, or something like that. So he's a practitioner, very, very impressive man. And sometimes he was saying there was a period where everyone was concerned with how much insight people had. How much insight do you have? Insight with a capital I, and people were asking him what was his most insightful experiences. And he said he was very clear that his most insightful experiences in his life were when he had really strong experiences of humiliation. Yeah, they were the experiences that he had the most insight from, the most learning from, because they showed just how much he was foolish and how he acted. Yeah, just how much foolishness he was indulging in himself. Yeah, and he said that with complete kindness. It wasn't like he was being really hard on himself or anything. He really learned in those experiences. So that's one experience I want to say. And he talks about some of those, like where he's trying to impress his teacher by being really a yes man to him, and the teacher just ignores him for weeks on end, just to not relate to him in those terms. I remember something similar happening to me. So I'm an order member. I've been ordained into the Dublin Buddhist order, but I spent about 4 or 5 years training to be ordained. And one of the things, it's a very common thing that happens to people, is they get kind of what I call ordination fever, where you have a goal, which is ordination, and your job is to convince these men that you're ready for ordination, to come hell or high water. So you do everything you can to convince them that you're a deeply spiritual being who's ready to be ordained, And I was working with this, I was on retreat with this one man called Satyaraja, who's a good friend of mine now. And I'd heard that this guy who I'd been on retreat with before had been invited to be ordained. And I thought, well, if he's ready, I'm ready, And I totally wasn't ready, by the way, just a spoiler alert. But anyways, and I went out for this walk at Satyaraja, and I did my damnedest to convince him that I was ready for ordination. And he was very kind, and he just kind of looked at me and said, no, not really. I think you have a bit of work to do in yourself. And my whole world just shattered, because I'd built it up so much in my head. Because on retreat, sometimes you do go a little bit mad and you get a bit obsessive because you distract yourself with Netflix anymore, or whatever it is, And my whole world just shattered. And I remember sitting down on the couch afterwards and just feeling like everything had just crumbled, all my plans and everything. And actually, it was such a positive experience once I got over the initial pain of it. And I have to say, it was one of the best experiences of my life, actually. And what happened after that point was that I just stopped doing ordination fever, because I just saw that it's a really painful thing to do, and it's really unpleasant for me, and it's really unpleasant for other people. And because it's painful, when you really see that habits are painful, you stop doing them, generally speaking. That's what the Buddha says in one of the texts. When one sees that these things are painful, one stops doing them. It's almost like literally that quote. I'm paraphrasing it slightly. So humiliation shows you how what you're doing is actually painful and useless. Now, I'm not talking about people mocking you or anything. I'm talking about where you've caused yourself to be humiliated through your actions. Yeah. So it's a very strong medicine. And I'm not saying that you're worthless or that you should wallow in worthlessness or anything like that. You know what I mean? I'm just saying that when you feel a bit humiliated, look at it as an opportunity to learn, rather than as an opportunity to feel betrayed or hurt people or blame yourself or be hard on yourself. Yeah. And it can be very, very insightful experiences and very, very good fruit for reflection. Yeah. Okay. So I hope that makes sense. And it might be an interesting question to reflect upon. What makes humiliation or foolishness? Maybe foolishness is a better word, because humiliation is quite strong. But what makes realizing you've been foolish a learning experience and not just a painful experience? So that might be something to reflect upon as well. What makes it a learning experience rather than a painful experience? And I'm not going to tell you the answer to that. I think that's a really good question to reflect upon yourselves this week. So what I might do with the home practice, by the way, in the email, I'll send out some of these questions in the email as well if you haven't got them written down, because I think some of them are quite juicy. And then very briefly, I'll just mention about suffering. Suffering is the other thing, and loss. So when you suffer, it can be that one suffers because of one's actions, but it can also be that one just suffers. I think just part of having a body is that one suffers from time to time, and we've all suffered from COVID because of nothing we've done. You know what I mean? I doubt any of you have a secret chemical lab that it secretly got released from, you know, I hope not anyway. So, you know, we were largely blameless. It's nothing that we did, but yet we've had this year and a half of, you know, for some of us, most of us, I'm sure, varying degrees of suffering. So an interesting reflection is that life just sometimes there is suffering and there's nothing you can do about it, you know? And you can't fix everything. You can't fix everything. That's an interesting reflection on life, because often we feel like suffering is a measure, suffering and gain. We've seen this we did this on the Sailing the Worldly Winds course. Pleasure and pain basically are used as yardsticks for measuring your score at life. Yeah. And you think that if you're in pleasure, you're winning at life. And if you're in pain, you're losing at life. But that's really far too simplistic. So when you're suffering, when you experience loss, when you experience pain, it can be good just to reflect that this is part of life. Not getting depressed, doing this with metta, you know, or that just as I suffer, other people suffer. That's a very traditional Buddhist reflection as well that helps cultivate empathy. Or maybe you need to look at, well, what can I be telling myself here? You know, are my stories causing myself suffering? So I'm expecting things to happen a certain way. I'm expecting to get a certain thing from this. I'm expecting this packet of sweets to solve all my problems, you know, and actually you just feel ill afterwards. You know, that's a very simple example, but we do that at all kinds of levels as well, you know, and a lot of our suffering we create by expectations, you know. So reflections like that are really useful as well. So there's more I could say, but I kind of want to start wrapping up there, but I'm doing some reflection. And the other thing, you know, with loss and that, I think loss is another experience where we can really feel, we can really have insight. You know, we can really gain these insights into life. You know, what were our expectations here? What were we, you know, what is this feeling of loss? What are we missing? And I mean, some things, it's not saying that, you know, it's not normal to feel loss. You know, if someone, a good friend moves to a different country or someone dies, of course we'll feel loss. Yeah, of course we feel loss. And we shouldn't tell ourselves we shouldn't feel loss, but they are interesting opportunities as well. Like a reflection there might be like, you know, how does one love and be okay with losing people as well? You know, that's a really interesting reflection. And for me, you have to love as much as possible. I think we probably all agree with that. And at the same time, we have to be open to losing people too. So if you feel up for that kind of reflection, or if life trusts that kind of reflection upon you, that can be very good as well, you know? So anyways, so that's they're the many things you can reflect upon. Let me just show you that screen again. So when we're in positive states of mind, we can reflect upon, say, having no self or no fixity, or that things change all the time. That's a traditional reflection. When we're in negative states of mind, we can reflect, well, is there anything here I'm doing that is perpetuating this? Or is there any better way of relating to this? Or did I cause the suffering to myself? We're not getting into blame or anything like that, you know? Or why am I so attached to a certain outcome here? Or why can't I let this go? You know, that kind of thing. And just to say as well about negative states of mind, there's nothing wrong with pain in Buddhism. Pain is just pain, and actually pain can be quite, I don't know, there can be a certain kind of beauty, or at least it can help us appreciate beauty when we're in touch with pain. It's more like suffering where we're doing the mental aspect of turning it over and again. So in a way, there's a distinction between pain on the one hand, which is just a given, and the suffering that we layer upon it, you know, as well. So that's another interesting reflection. What's the difference between pain and suffering, you know? Anyway, so that's, we can reflect upon our foolishness in terms of what we can learn from it, what we might want to stop doing. And we can reflect upon, again, suffering and loss. Yeah. Okay, hope that's not freaked you out or anything, or made you all depressed or anything. Don't forget what I said about positivity as well. So, you know, do get in touch with metta. And if you find that reflection is making you feel down, just stop doing it that day and go and do something nice, and do the metta bhavana if you know how to do the loving kindness practice, or pick a good friend and rejoice in their merits in your mind. Think about what a good person they are, you know, things like that. Okay, so I'm happy to have any questions if there are any, if you want to put some in the chat. And we'll do a reflection in a minute then, and then we'll go into groups. Okay, so why don't we, if you have a question, obviously you can keep typing it and I'll hopefully answer it afterwards if we have time. But why don't we just set ourselves up for one last reflection this evening? Hopefully you're not too full now. I know it's getting on in the evening. Happy solstice, everyone, by the way. The longest day of the year, so maybe we're good to go for a little bit longer. Okay, so let's just spend a couple of minutes just doing nothing again, maybe 2 or 3 minutes, because there was a lot of input there. So let's just do nothing. Don't even, just forget about it all and just look out a window or something, or just sit with your eyes closed, whatever you want to do. Now, maybe introducing an element of reflection. So you might want to do any of those that we mentioned. If you're in a very good state and you want to continue on some of the reflections on self or change, you could do that. Or if you wanted to bring yourself back to a negative state of mind that you were in during the week or some incident and reflect upon, why you were so upset about that, you could do that. If you can stay with the discomfort and intensity, or some kind of way in which you were foolish during the week, or some kind of sense of loss. So any of those you want to do. Bring yourself back to that situation if that's the case, and seeing what questions you want to reflect upon then, allowing them the space to emerge. Just one or two more moments. Letting the reflection go then, I'll just read a poem to finish this part up. So the poem is called Kindness. Before you know what kindness really is, you must lose things. Feel the future dissolve in a moment, like salt in a weakened broth. What you held in your hand, what you counted and carefully saved, all this must go so you know how desolate the landscape can be between the regions of kindness. How you ride and ride thinking the bus will never stop. The passengers eating maize and chicken will stare out the window forever. Before you learn the tender gravity of kindness, you must travel where the Indian in a white poncho lies dead by the side of the road. You must see how this could be you, how he too was someone who journeyed through the night with plans and the simple breath that kept him alive. Before you know kindness as the deepest thing inside, you must know sorrow as the other deepest thing. You must wake up with sorrow. You must speak to it till your voice catches the thread of all sorrows and you see the size of the cloth. Then it is only kindness that makes sense anymore. Only kindness that ties your shoes and sends you out into the day to mail letters and purchase bread. Only kindness that raises its head from the crowd of the world to say, "It is I you have been looking for," and then goes with you everywhere like a shadow or a friend. Okay, I hope that reflection was okay for you. You can have a chance in a few moments to chat about it in the group and to set your intentions for the week. So just to give you the home practice this week, let me just share my screen. Okay, so the home practice this week, read chapter 2 of the book. There's a lot of detail in the book. It's all very readable, but there's a lot of details. So don't worry if you don't get it all through it. If it's too much to read, just read the bits that you feel drawn to and interested in. You already have enough to reflect upon. You could continue to spend 10 minutes a day doing nothing or reflecting. I want you to do 10 minutes a day. And if that just means, if you feel like you just need to do nothing, do that. Or if you want to do nothing for a few minutes and then reflect, do that. Yeah. In whatever way works for you. Or indeed, you could do longer if you wanted each day. And yeah, just bring an attitude or reflection to whatever occurs to you. You know, you can bring it into that 10 minutes or just reflect upon it elsewhere as well. And as I said, you know, when you're feeling happy, when you're in negative states of mind, and when you're experiencing foolishness or suffering or loss or grief, yeah. So whatever occurs to you, reflection is just giving the space for that to emerge and the questions to emerge. Yeah. And then do come onto Slack and let us know how you're getting on. There's been some really nice stuff shared there. I'll include the link again this week, but it'll be lovely to hear from a few more of you on Slack if you're up for that. And I'll be posting some stuff there as well. I'll post the poems, that poem as well, and I'll post a couple more poems as well. I'll put them in the Slack channel. I'll try and include them in the email as well if the email doesn't get too long. Yeah, so that's the home practice. I'll share that now in the chat box so you can have it going into your groups. Yes, thanks, Dan. That was, I don't know how to pronounce her name, so Naomi Shahabni, if that's how you pronounce it. I'm not entirely sure. So here's the home practice. So Stephen, could you send us into our groups for like 9 minutes, if that's all right? Great, thanks for that, Dan. I might share that. I'll share that link. I'll share the poems with everyone in the email as well, and another couple of ones as well. Okay, so that's kind of it then for tonight. Just to say again that like the danger with reflecting on suffering and loss and foolishness, that it's not about making yourself feel bad about yourself, just to really emphasize that. And Buddhism is about making you feel more free and happy and well and connected to life. So just remember that as well this week, and do your 10 minutes and everything. And we'll see you back here next week. So next week we'll be looking at reflecting more on a topic. So how to take reflection a bit deeper on a topic. And we'll see you back here next week. And if you have any questions that are burning, you can feel free to stay on now. And if you want to stay on to hear those questions, but we haven't had many so far, but otherwise we'll see you next week.